Hello, everyone, and welcome to InvenTank, the show for inventors where I'm joined by a special guest host for some fun conversation and to help answer all your burning invention questions. I'm your host, Lisa Lloyd, and we're streaming live today, or you may be catching the replay on one of your favorite podcasting platforms. InvenTank is made possible by the Invention Accelerator, helping inventors to skip the painful and expensive learning curve and invent wow products, protect them properly, and get them in front of the right people at the right companies to pitch like a pro for licensing. To learn more, go to theinventionaccelerator.com. In a moment, we'll begin taking your questions, so feel free to drop them in the comments at any time. But first, I'd like to introduce you my very special guest host today, Eitan. I almost did it again, right? Eitan Kramer. Sorry about that. I promised you I wouldn't get that wrong. I don't know why all of a sudden. Say it again.
Not the first time, I promise.
Eitan Kramer. Eitan is a product developer and the creator of the award-winning kids brand MorfBoard. Before becoming a successful inventor, though, Eitan was a professional inline halfpipe skater. He competed in the first 6 ESPN X-Games and maintained a top 5 ranking throughout his career. That's pretty awesome, especially in something that you can get injured so easily in. He even earned a Guinness World Record for the highest air on a half pipe. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to hear your story today and all the learnings that we're going to get from you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited too.
I'm especially when it was last minute. So I would love to kick things off. Now I have a commercial that I want to share with everybody and I'll pull it up in a moment. But before we show everyone the MorfBoard, what it does and how it works, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came up with this idea?
So are we talking about MorfBoard or are we talking about Ruckus?
MorfBoard.
Okay, awesome. So MorfBoard was a development over 15 years worth of being a skater. As a half pipe skater, like your gear is everything, right? It is an extension of your identity, and it doesn't matter if you skate half pipe or if you go running. Like, this is the vehicle that's going to make you better in some way. And action sports for me was a vehicle to go from being bullied in school to being, around kids that had like minds and did the same things that I wanted to do. And I had a huge community out of it. So, that was even before the professional career. So I just wanted to really offer that to young people and bring together all of these different components because it's a modular system, and let kids experiment, right? You don't have to commit to any one thing in particular. You kind of buy into a system where at a lower cost, you can experiment with different modalities, whether it be a skateboard or a scooter or a balance board or a bouncer, to really dip your feet in the water. And then ultimately, if you decide that skateboarding is your thing, great. If you decide that scootering is your thing, great. I don't care. I just want you to go out and ride and have a great time.
Have fun. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that was the seed of what MorfBoard was really meant to do.
How long ago did you say that was?
So I had been pursuing it in some form. It was originally, talk about pivot. Originally, it was a fitness product because I was a trainer after I was a skater. And I was like, well, this makes total sense. There should be a modular system in fitness that you can strap all of these different things onto it. And I built this Kickstarter thing, and I raised money, and I spent a lot of money, and I put it out there, and I was like, this is going to blow up, and it didn't. I didn't have
What? How could it not?
It's also very interesting when it comes to the fitness community. Like, people say they want certain things, and what they actually do, what their proclivities really, really show is that they don't want, like, I want it to be the most exciting, because that's scary and that's dangerous. And it takes a little while sometimes to bring people along. And, being young and sort of naive, I thought because I liked it, everyone's going to like it. Obviously, they did not. And I was devastated, but ultimately through a relationship, talked to somebody who worked at a toy company, and I was like, well, it already has wheels and it already has this like bouncy thing. This is for kids. This is like, what was I even thinking? This is for sure for kids. And then that's sort of how it all unfolded.
It unfolded from there. So when you say you tested it and found out that it wasn't in wide demand after all, can you tell me a little bit about what that experiment or rollout was, what that looked like?
So specifically for MorfBoard as a fitness tool, I made the mistake. Let me take that back. I did test it with clients. I had an idea of what it needed to be, and my clients validated that idea for me.
Okay.
What I decided to put blinders on in the moment was that their kids were stealing the product while the parents were resting, and they were taking it to go skate. They were taking it to go bounce.
Wow.
They were taking it to all kinds. And I was like, sure, kid, give me back the thing.
And you didn't see it.
No, because in my mind, this is what it had to be. And I think that, you know, in hindsight, obviously 2020,
Always 2020.
and we got there. But, and I would say that like we had to go through this experience in order to get to the next one. But I find, especially now, we fall in love with our ideas so much. We put so much behind it. We invest like money and time, and the disdain of other people are like, what are you doing? This is so stupid. You're like, no, this is my thing.
Yeah, it's true.
To the exclusion of reason sometimes, you know, you have to validate your product with people and play patterns and use cases. And when the results come back that you don't like, you have to accept and internalize and pivot. I didn't, but you should.
I honor you, and I'm so grateful for your I don't know, transparency and sharing that. Some people might be embarrassed or, you know, withhold because they're putting up the show, but there's such a great amount of learning there, and it's so valuable, and it tastes good when you have it in the right perspective as a learning as opposed to as a failure, right? Because to your point, you were able to pivot and take the learning and really do something significant with it.
Sure. And also sitting in my closet crying, drinking a bottle of wine. Those two things can coexist at the same time.
That's right. Oh my God. I say that all the time. I can be pissed off about something and park that, and also have the right attitude, perspective to keep going and keep my blinders on, but with this learning, and they coexist. Absolutely. Right. Oh my God. I'm so excited that you said that. Okay. So, before I show the commercial, well, actually, that's a good place to show the commercial. I just want to remind everybody, we are live. You can drop your questions in the comments, and we'll get to them in just a moment in the order in which they're received. So if you are not familiar with MorfBoard, we have a quick commercial that I'm going to share with you. I pulled it up from YouTube. Give you an idea of what we're talking about here.
MorfBoard, the only board you'll ever need. It's one board that transforms in seconds. With super simple lock and release technology, just drop extensions into the board and turn. The flex trigger locks, and you're ready to ride. Blast through the neighborhood. Stick your tricks. Grab some air. Find your balance. MorfBoard is year-round fun. Anywhere, anytime. MorfBoard, one board, countless options. Items sold separately, adult supervision required.
Love it. All right. So you mentioned.
Can I interject? Man, that voiceover was so good. It was so good. I'm just kidding. That was me. And I have a really nasal voice, but they were just like, do it. You do it. It's fine. I was like, okay.
That's so funny. I didn't realize. That's incredible. Were you nervous or?
I messed up so many times. We were in the booth, and I was just like, MorfBoard. And they were like, hey, can you do that with a little bit less inflection on the MorfBoard? Okay. Way too long.
Because people don't realize how many different ways there are to say a single word.
And then you go down the rabbit hole and you say the word the, and you're like, is that a word? So many times,
Where are we going? What exactly is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you spoke with someone, and it occurred to you, maybe this really is a toy, and that became an option. Tell me about that part of your journey or this process.
Well, I had to go back to, at this point, I already had investors, and my family included, which, talk about stress, like it's one thing to take your friend's money. It's another thing to take your parents' money. And they were very, very kind to get behind it. But also, like, I lost them already a significant amount of money based on the Kickstarter. So to come back and be like, okay, all that stuff, that was garbage. This is the way. Everybody was really supportive, thankfully. I had an amazing group around me. My partner at the time was also a designer. So everything that you saw in that commercial from a design standpoint, that was his work. And he's extremely talented. He was probably one of the hardest sells because he had to do a lot of the heavy lifting right out of the gate, right? It's like, hey, I know that we designed this thing that does this stuff for fitness, but now we need to redesign all of it.
Reimagine the whole thing.
The whole thing. And so once I got him on board, we had new renderings to show. We had the previous prototype, so that showed that the mechanism worked, the locking mechanism. I had already patented. By the time it got to the toy company, I already had, I think, a few patents on it. So transferring that over into a different form factor wasn't going to be a problem, and protection was, clear. And we took in these, this really nice presentation and the old prototype with all the extensions and attachments. And we're like, this was Morph. This is Morph. This is where we'd like to take Morph. And amazingly, in the room, the EVP and his assistant were like, yep, we're in.
This was at Jack's?
It was at Jack's. And they're like, we're in. We want the kids version. We want the fitness version. Let's go.
Right there on the spot, they said that.
And then 7 months later, we signed a contract. But
exactly.
Right there on the spot, they were super, super into it. And the executive vice president of the division was the biggest champion throughout the life of the brand and the product.
That's wonderful. What took 7 months to get a contract done?
Oh man, contracts are tricky, and they take multiple passes just to get on the same page. Sometimes one thing leads to a total undoing of the contract. I'm not sure if that they would remember this. And I love their head of counsel. I love it. We're actually very good friends. But at one point I had to walk away from the table. I spoke with one of my advisors, and he was like, you can't, they offered something that was outside of the scope of what we had been discussing for months prior. We were nearing the end. And then
it was like last minute, they tried to slide it in.
Yeah. I mean, well, also when it came to sort of overall compensation and things like that with royalty rate and whatever. And he just looked at me, he's like, look, you can do this deal, but you will only negotiate maybe back to where you were. The only thing you can do is walk away from the table to reset it. It was that moment, because here I was trying to get something going in my life, not just in this product.
Right.
And I was so close, and it was tangible. And really, at the end of the day, I just want to make stuff. So here's a huge company that's like, yeah, we'll make it, and we'll bring you in. We'll pay you to do it. And it was the absolute hardest thing in the world to be like, guys, clearly we're not on the same page here. Thank you very much for this opportunity, but we'll have to pass. What
did you tell yourself to give yourself the boldness to be able to walk away? Did you have a backup plan?
No backup plan. It's just, I just said, this isn't mine. If I have, I think we all have that duality of like, there is a sense of something bigger and purpose and fate in a certain direction, that if something doesn't go your way, you're kind of like, okay, well, that wasn't for me. I really wanted it, but clearly there's something else for me. And then there's the other side. It's like, you're an idiot. Take the deal. You're going to be a trainer for the rest of your life. Not that that's bad. It just wasn't for me. And so that I just had
you must have believed somewhere inside of you that there was a better deal, because without it, a bad deal is better than no deal, but a better deal is better than a bad deal, right? So the only reason to walk away would be to say to yourself, there's either a better deal or it's not worth the trouble that it comes with, right?
Yeah, I think that's totally true. But also, I just couldn't in good conscience make that deal. We had worked so hard. We had worked so hard and so long for things to have shifted so dramatically in such a short amount of time, that the voice of my advisor at the time was like, you have to, if there's, what really did it for me is that if they're serious, they'll come back to the table. Mm-hmm. And if they're not, then you weren't going to get a good deal anyway. And this wasn't going to go well anyway. They weren't going to pay attention to it. If they're not honoring this part of the relationship, they're not going to honor that part of the relationship. And you'll be miserable for the next 5 years, which was the term of the contract.
So, and that's important, because in toys, they do tend to be shorter agreements than other products that maybe have longer shelf lives. But because toys tend to kind of run their life cycle fairly short, for people who might be thinking about how long an agreement is. So they came back?
They came back. We wrote an email basically saying like, hey, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for this opportunity, but unfortunately this isn't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think within a few hours, it was sort of like, no, of course we're good. Let's keep going. And it was a non-issue. Maybe it was a point where they could just like, let's just see, let's just test.
So why not just ask them to take it out as opposed to walking away if you hadn't even had that conversation?
Again, it came down to a lot of sort of compensation and royalty rate that by the time we had gotten to the end, it was like, even if I negotiated back up like hugely, it would have only gotten us back to where we started. So the only way was out and then to reset and then go, let's pick up where we left off before this happened.
And obviously you were happier with the end results at that point.
Yes. Yeah.
The net result from that. That's fabulous.
It worked out better. Yeah.
And so you went to market by licensing the product. How long did it take them then from the signing of that deal, that 7 months later, at that point to go to market and you start to see the revenue from that?
We signed our deal in the beginning of 2017. We developed it that entire year. We launched it initially direct to consumer, and I believe we were at retail by February in Target. We were on mod, so like on the shelf when you walk down and you see all the skateboards and scooters and things like that. And I took the compulsory like picture with that, which was hugely rewarding. So we started seeing revenue the beginning of second quarter, which was technically the way that these things sort of pay out is like at the end of a quarter, there's like usually about a 30-day window where they can pay you beyond that, and then they pay you that entire previous quarter's royalty.
Right.
So really by March of April of the following year, we were
about a year and a little less than a year and a half. Yeah.
So it was good and it was quick, and we thankfully people were really, really excited about it. Yeah.
Direct response can help with that advertising and make people aware of something that's brand new and the demonstration. I love that Jax uses direct response often to launch exciting new products like yours. What was that experience like for you in doing the commercial and getting the word out?
I was like, how are people are paying me? I mean, like, I get it that, you know, you come in with a lot of IP and about 8 years worth of work prior to get to this point.
Yeah.
And a lot of money spent, but I got on set and, I had written the script. I cast all the kids with the production company. I'm on set in Reno and I'm like, you guys are paying me to do this?
I know.
It was the coolest. It was honestly, like there were a lot of challenges. And for me personally, having never worked for anyone ever, and while it was sort of adjacent to working for someone because I was technically a consultant, it was very weird. If you come into this scenario, a licensing scenario, and then they hire you in as a consultant to service the brand, you are both an employee and an employer. Because on the one hand, you're the licensor and you can dictate, right? They have to present things to you and say, hey, do you approve of this? Do you approve of this? And on the other hand, they're like, hey, did you get that thing done yesterday? Because they're paying you, as a consultant. So it's a very weird balance to strike. And then working within an infrastructure is also crazy because I'm sorry, but big companies have dynamics that I had never experienced before, and learning sort of the political landscape in order to get something done was entirely new.
Yeah, navigating those interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah, egos and budgets and best practices versus opinions and everything else.
Yeah, challenging.
I'm going to jump over to some questions here, and then I actually have some more questions for you. Gabriel is asking, in the event that I do end up getting a licensing deal, is it best to collect the royalties through your LLC or directly to you? Note, I am the only party involved, no investors, partners, or employees. I have some opinions on that, but what do you think about it, Eitan?
I don't do anything personally. I try and move everything off to an LLC. It removes a level of liability. that I don't personally want to hold, whether the money flows directly through or not, because the LLC is not getting taxed. It doesn't matter. I think from an intellectual property standpoint and from a just overall liability standpoint, I like to keep a separation between me as a person and the entities that I put anything under.
My agreements all stipulate that I'm insulated. I just had this conversation with some other people about this specific subject. I personally do it all directly, just to Lisa, under my social, I guess, sole proprietor. And then the agreements all stipulate that I'm indemnified against anything because I have no control, which I know we're going to get to in a moment. Mm-hmm. But if I were going to do an LLC, I would wait until I have money that's actually about to come in or is coming in to then create the LLC, as opposed to setting up yet another expense, because you do have accounting and you do have reporting, and, you know, the IRS has to get everything that they're supposed to get. Even just doing the paperwork is pain in the butt and expensive. So if you're not already making money, it doesn't make sense to set it up in the beginning. I'd wait and do that later. And you can always make that decision to turn that switch on or off.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a legal and financial decision as well as a business strategy. So make sure you talk to a good accountant, make sure you talk to a good lawyer, and then just check your gut. Awesome. Okay. I'm going to do.
Good answer.
Go ahead.
No, that was a good answer.
Oh.
You should
Derek,
do this for a living.
You know what? Maybe I should do this.
Yeah.
I would do it for free all the time if I could afford to. All right. Derek's asking, if, by the way, he's saying great stuff. Regarding MorfBoard, what would you do differently if you had to do it over? Which is perfect because it's actually one of my questions. Thanks, Derek, for asking.
Thank you, Derek. And thank you for that. You know, there were a lot of things that we set out to do and that we hoped to do from a marketing standpoint. I think we executed incredibly well. From a product standpoint, I think less so, especially as someone who, like I said earlier, comes from action sports and knows what good gear is. You know, we got into a scenario, and this is not specific to toy. It's not specific to my product or the company that I was working with, but a lot of times you are beholden to buyers and deadlines. And you have to make a choice in the moment of, do we hold this back, this product, because it's not ready or the quality isn't as high as we'd like it to be, or do we put it out because it is good enough? And you may think, oh, it's not at all, but realistically, is it? And if the answer is yes, it is good enough to put out into the world, then you make running changes. And I think, so circle back to your point or your question, what I would do differently is I would try as hard as I possibly could to simplify the process at the outset. There were certain things from a design standpoint that we really wanted to execute on, and ultimately through the chain of custody and the manufacturer, it proved hard, and it showed in the product.
Can you give us an example to help drive that point home?
Sure. So we have a scooter attachment to the system. And we wanted these, I wish I had the scooter with me, but we wanted the leg. Sure. Actually, well, I have a board. I happen to have a board right here.
Oh, surprise.
But essentially, we wanted these arms for the scooter. You know, like normal scooters have, you know, the wheels right here. And we were like, oh, that's just not cool enough. We need to cantilever these arms out where the wheels can sit forward. And from a design standpoint, it was a choice. There were some functionality issues because the skateboard, you know, there's the end of the skateboard and it might hit the board as it turned. But really, we were in love with this idea. It proved to be so challenging in production because as you're extending that arm, you're increasing a lot of the strain at the connection point. We had to solve around for that, and then the turning radius was challenged partly because of that. And I think I would simplify.
So the challenges that you're talking about then are the ripple effect of the difference between your minimum viable product, your MVP, and all of your desirable features that you would love to have. And any of those changes that you make causes this ripple effect to the whole rest of the device, potentially. Yes?
Yeah. And, you know, the overall quality of the product, the feel of the product. You know, I look back at this. These holes are really significantly large, and the reason why they are is because we didn't, you know, initially we didn't like smaller holes. And we didn't like that they looked a certain way. We felt that this was really cool looking, very different than any normal skateboard, which also proved to be a challenge when we got to the manufacturing process, because now all of a sudden your entire board is being propped up by these two little pieces of plastic in the front and the back.
And that's a lot of stress on the board.
Exactly. So we have to design around it, make it a little bit, a little heavier as a result. And, one thing kind of leads to another. I think, long story short, I would love to have reevaluated it and go, well, we don't need that. We don't need that. Let's design around this, and then made it a tighter package. Ironically, I have the brand back now, and we have completely redesigned it, accommodating all of the challenges that we met over the last 5 years. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. So now that you have the brand back, how can people purchase the product now?
Well, they can't, because we redesigned it from an engineering standpoint, from a visual standpoint, but we haven't gone to production yet. So in a very similar way, I'm actually sitting here going, do I go the route of license, or is this something that I want to invest and really do a startup? I lean very, very heavily towards license again, given the risk profile, and which is this versus this.
Right.
And we're talking to a very large toy company now to see if that's going to work.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Licensing a product for the second time has its pros and its cons, or it's a different set of challenges. I guess I should say it that way instead. So with the French Twister, my first product, which actually you can kind of see in this right here on the in front of that patent, it was a barrette that opened up, closed, and rolled up and made a French twist. So it was my first product. It was 23. And when I invented it, 25 when I licensed it. And they took it and they made it out of a different plastic, because I had no control over that. It should have been made out of a polypropylene, because the way the clasp worked, you had to stretch it like this to get it to open. If you couldn't stretch it, if it was too dense of a plastic, then the clasp was such that you would not be able to open it. It was very frustrating. And that's exactly what happened. And I heard it from people all the time. I couldn't get them to make it out of the right plastic. Well, 10, 12 years later, when they converted it from an exclusive to a non-exclusive agreement, because the sales started to wane, as a non-exclusive, they could continue to sell through what they had just to make it go away. But I had the rights to then go license to another. So I licensed it to Almar Sales, which had the brand Suave at the time. And to accommodate for the cheaper plastic, which is why Scunsy went that direction in the first place. And I certainly knew Almar would want to do the same thing, because they were selling it to dollar stores. I changed the clasp. It was an easy fix. We could have done it before and it would have probably had even more sales, but because the product did so well in the stores, in fact, it was on the top 10 what's hot list at Walmart for the first 12 weeks it was in the store. So they didn't think that they needed to change it, but I was the one hearing the complaints from people. So it was really frustrating, and I wasn't able to make this changes very similar to what you're saying until after I got it back. So it's a good story though for people to know that that's an option, right?
Absolutely.
Now, the challenge of going to the second company was they're thinking, well, if it's already not working and they switched it, why would we take it on? But it is those design changes, I'm guessing, that you're going to focus on in that pitch. Is that right?
Yeah, that's 100% right. It's sort of like, we know that it works. I mean, it was wildly successful for 2 years. We were on end cap at Target, and it flew off the shelves for the first year and a half. Right. What got us, unfortunately, was that, at the end of the day, people got on it and they're like, oh, this doesn't feel so good. Well, we fixed all that. And we will ultimately change the name. At the end of the day, really, the only thing that matters is this mechanism that allows you to quick change from one thing to the next.
So when you say they got on it and it didn't feel good, I thought the reason that it wasn't with Jax anymore was because of the recall. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. That was all part and parcel of this challenge and disconnect between what we wanted to create and what manufacturing was capable of doing. Unfortunately, and I wish that this was something that I personally had control over, which, as you get into a licensing arrangement, you're walking into a set of relationships that have potentially been in existence for multiple years. So for us to say, hey, we only want to do this with someone who knows how to make action sports gear, we did say that, and it didn't really resonate, because they were like, look, we understand these parts. We will use one of our manufacturers who happens to make dolls, by the way.
Not skateboards.
It might have been a, but they tooled up. They took the learnings. China is very, very good about being able to study and analyze and replicate. And ultimately, it just wasn't right. And in this particular situation, just so silly. Every T-bar, for the most part, on scooters, if you look at them closely, you'll see this like dime configuration of the welding. It's like one stacked on top of the other, stacked on top of the other. It creates a very robust connection. They didn't have that particular tool, and ultimately, they changed a lot of things up once these things were brought to their attention. But at the end of the day, if a couple of T-bars break, that's kind of a big deal. And it was for the moment, and that was challenging.
So there was this recall because a few kids got hurt. I think I read it was a little over 250,000 units that they had to call back in. If I do the math, that's several $1 million, right?
Well, T-bars, which is, none of it's good. I for sure won't sit here and go like, oh, it was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But the integrity of the entire board and all of its attachments were great, other than the T-bar. So what ended up happening was people would send back a T-bar, 90 some odd % of them, and it was a really small amount that actually got sent back. They just got replaced with a different T-bar with a different welding process, as well as we had this signature triangle T, and we minimized it just to a normal T in order to alleviate some of the actual welds, right? The connection points.
Did that affect your royalties or ability to earn with Jax at that point?
I think at that point, it was a very interesting moment in time, because at that point, the company on the whole was having a bit of a moment. They're doing really, really well right now. Mm-hmm. But it was at that inflection point that they were like, look, anything that's causing us trouble right now, we have to step away from.
Yeah.
We have to walk off. And that's, when some as the creator, as the creator, when that's something that you've poured your heart and soul into, and again, lots of things that are perfectly fixable, mm-hmm. That ultimately don't get done, and it's completely out of your control.
Yeah.
That's so hard. Like I would love to go down by me messing up.
Do you think there was any, I know it's one thing when you make your own mistakes, but when you pay for someone else's mistakes, it's very painful, right? I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Do you think, and I know this is going to be a question on the minds of some of our listeners at the very least, was there anything that you could have done that would have prevented them from being able to mismanage that manufacturing process to the point that it caused even a recall?
Yeah. I could have said, no, I don't sign off on this. And they literally would have just said, cool, well, this product's not getting made. And
so it would have been the end of it for everybody.
End of it before it even got started.
Yeah.
There were, we had a checklist of all the running changes that we wanted to execute, and that was on there, and they knew it. And, they did make changes. Mm-hmm. It unfortunately just left
that one.
No, they ultimately changed that one, right? But it was already too late at that point. And because of the temperature within the company, Morph became a lesser priority than other things. And they just, they needed to kind of close up shop for a little while with regard to new development.
It lost its momentum.
Yeah.
So first you had the challenge with the contract where you had to make a decision to walk away. And after all of that, you finally come back in and you get this list, and now you've got to make the decision once again, either to walk away or just take what you got right now. And do you think in hindsight that that was the right choice for you?
Well, there were, I think that it was the most viable choice at the time. There were options available to us, but they were really limited. So we just had to do the best that we could with what we had at the moment. And I was honestly at that point just really excited to redesign and redevelop, because I think that the core idea is viable. Every time that I took it anywhere in the world, kids freaked out the moment they saw something connecting.
Right.
I held on to that one truth that I could see. All the other stuff is noise. All the other stuff can be fixed.
Good.
And my relationship with Jax is great. Like, we walked away from it. We walked away super amicably. You know, I look forward to working with them in the future, but clearly with, you know, under different circumstances, because they've changed as a company, and
Right.
and I now know what to look for as well, a little bit more acutely.
That's awesome. Okay, so Gabriel's asking a question. How often do licensees also enlist the licensor as a consultant for their company, or do they usually want little to nothing to do with the inventor once the deal is signed? Is it wrong to ask them if they have a job for the inventor they're dealing with?
That's a really good question.
It is. I love it. Thanks, Gabriel.
And I think it runs the gamut. I think, you know, I happen to have an experience with Jax where I had a lot of know-how in the action sports industry and the way that they talk and the marketing and all of that stuff. And so it made perfect sense to bring our team in. If you're working with a company that feels that they have the competency to do all of those things in-house, there's a really good chance that that's not going to happen. It's not, from my understanding, it is not as common as what my experience has shown. So it really is a crapshoot. It really depends on what you're making, who you're making it with, and what their core level of ability is within their company. A lot of times, it makes a lot of sense to hire in somebody because they don't need to bring that into their own infrastructure. They're just going to pay out for a little while. And a lot of times, once royalties start coming in, they're like, well, you know, you're getting paid, so
go away.
or you can work, like,
come in,
work,
right?
Exactly. But you don't need to get paid because you're getting paid.
Yeah.
So
good.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really is like on a case-by-case basis, depending on who they are, who you are, what you're bringing to the table, what they're bringing to the table. You know, it's a dance.
Right on. Perfect. Really well said. I think, and my first product, the French Twister, I was 25 years old when I was licensing it. I clearly didn't have any skills other than I was a girl with hair, you know, and they were men with no hair that I had licensed it to. They didn't have the skills in-house other than their marketing. But I didn't really want the job of, I didn't know that there was anything that I could do, any value that I could bring to the table. But I did ask at the time of negotiating the deal if it would be okay. And I gave them the out. I said, you don't have to if you don't want to. But, you know, I'm 25 years old and I have the dream of being on the packaging. So I said, would you mind considering having me on the packaging? If you don't think that I'm pretty enough, that's totally fine. And it worked out. I got it. And it was just like such a high. Now, I never needed to do that again because I checked the box and I felt good about it. A few years later, I was licensing again to them. This time they asked me, would I consider coming on as VP of Business Development? And I actually ended up working with the company for 6 months as the person that you would pitch your products to if you wanted them to license. And I was responsible for bringing in all of the new IP and doing all of those licensing deals. So, you know, it evolved into that kind of relationship. It wasn't right off the bat, but just like Eitan is saying, if you don't have some sort of skill that if you have some sort of skill that they don't already have, why not ask? Don't ask, don't get, right? But be okay with the answer being no.
Yeah. And I love it. I think it's, you know, look, there are different kinds of, not only are there different kinds of developers, but there are different kinds of developers with specific products. I've developed products that I'd be more than happy to just drop off and be like, hey, you guys got it? Cool, bye. And then I have products like MorfBoard, like Ruckus, that I'm so passionate about, that I have a clear vision for, that I would really love to be involved in the process on the day-to-day. And everyone's going to have sort of different levels of both desire and skill set in order to fulfill whatever is needed in that relationship.
Right on. And I can see why people want to work with you. You have a very clear and balanced perspective. I don't get any kind of greed or naive, you know, ignorance that would create drama or problems for us. You're very open and clearly a big learner. So I could see why companies would want to work with you.
I very much appreciate that. All of that was through trial and error. You know, my experience, and again, like, it was the greatest school that I could have possibly gone to, working with Jax for 5 years, because they taught me everything. And not because someone was there spoon feeding, like, here, this is how you do marketing, here, this, but because they were like, here, go do it. Go figure it out. Go build the website. I did customer service for the first like 6 months.
What?
I answered every customer email. I remember all of them.
Wow. Why would they hire you to do that instead of handling that internally?
Oh, because they didn't have, like, on Morph specifically, they were like, look, you're so close to this, just take on what you can take on. And they were really, really accommodating in that way. And so, I mean, like I said, it was all encompassing, and it had to do with launching a website. And part of that is who's going to answer the emails in the beginning. And it was me.
Wow.
And don't get me wrong, like, there was definitely anger and frustration.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
And I don't think that those things go away. I think, at least for me, I can't speak for everybody, but I think maturity looks like wanting to tell somebody off and knowing better to not do it. That's how my brain sort of process. It's not like I don't get pissed immediately. I get immediately incensed, and then I'm like, well, that's not that helpful. And
that's not helpful. Love it. Love it. Love it.
I'm not going to get very far if you tell them to go to hell. Yeah.
It's very different when you're skating, right? And the only opposition is the concrete or the pipe in your case or whatever,
right?
Versus dealing with people's sometimes unrealistic expectations or emotional fits or whatever. It takes a very different kind of personality.
So much of this is about relationships, right? And it's not just in the inventing world. It's if you want to get ahead in life, right? If you want to go, what is it? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with people, or something like that. Yes. And like, I want to burn lots of bridges. Like, I want to, Nero, just like burn it all down. But I think that if I look back and all the things that have materialized because I didn't do that, people that I'm working with, again, that I was like, I'm never going to work with them again. And that we've just come to the relationship in a different capacity because I've changed and because they've changed. All these opportunities really, really stem from just being a decent human, number one. And also, like, I think catching yourself when you want to burn something down, just be like, cool, let's see if I want to burn this down tomorrow. If I still want to burn it down tomorrow, then maybe. But
I can still write, but I can give it 24 hours before I make
24 hours before I burn this.
And then usually you don't want to by the next day.
No,
All right, so you're working on something new, and I want to talk about that in just 1 second. Let's answer a couple more quick questions here. April's asking, in regards to your royalty payments, did you take a one-time payment up front and wait months or a year for it to start? Which we kind of talked about that already, April. I'm not sure if you heard that, but if you wouldn't mind answering that quickly for us, Eitan.
Sure. I think, well, the way that I can understand that is when I signed my deals, and I think what is typical is when you sign a deal, you'll get an advance, whatever that number is going to be. And that really is going to be taken out of your future royalties. You can spend it any which way you want. It's your money. But from the time that you sign a contract to the time your product is released could sometimes be a year, could be a year and a half, could be 2 years. That's the money that you're getting until then. Hopefully your product launches. When it does, your royalty will be minus the advance that they had already provided you. So let's say it was $25,000. Your first check is going to be whatever it was going to be minus $25,000 because they had already given it to you as an advance on future earnings.
Perfect. Awesome. I hope that answers your question, April. And then Derek is asking, do you think you would have achieved the same level of success without your personal name recognition? That's a really good question.
That is. And Derek, thank you for thinking that I have name recognition.
Well, even if someone doesn't know, your credibility is in the success that you've had, right? So when you have that bio kind of preceding your introduction, does it help?
I think it helps. I think people, look, I think with anyone's bio, you are going to impress them in a room, period, the end. Like, you could come in with the most incredible resume and then you're a jerk.
Right.
And they don't want to work with you. And vice versa. Like, listen, I don't have anything. I just graduated college. I have this amazing idea for this thing to snap onto this thing. Oh my God. Right. And I want to work with you. So I think that in the case of Morph, yes, it helped initially because of my background. It made perfect sense. It also allowed me to be sort of in the front of what was going on because I knew my world really, really well. But my new product that we're launching, and we can talk about that at some point, I didn't really have any experience in the direction that we're going. But I speak passionately about it, and I try and have fun. And I think that is such a huge element. When you walk through the door, do people want to be around you? I think that really is the fundamental baseline of I've been in rooms where it's well, we can call this person, he's so talented. Yeah, but he sucks to work with.
Yeah, it's true.
And they don't call.
Right. I have somebody that wants to work with me on something right now that someone before me had tried to work with this company on, and they just didn't like that person. And I don't even know why. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is, and I'm sure that there are times where I have probably not, because sometimes people just don't jive too, right? It just doesn't work for that reason. All right. I would love to hear. So you mentioned it just now. You're now kind of venturing in this new direction. Tell us about what you're working on next.
So it's called Ruckus FX. I actually have a device here that I can show you. And it looks like this in package because it's so pretty. Which way? Oh.
That's beautiful packaging.
Whoa.
So are you hiring a packaging design company to help you with that stuff?
We did. Yeah. Super talented. Again, we're on calls with them every day. So
you want to drop their name in case someone's looking for someone like that?
His name is John Hudson, and it's oh man, you put me on the spot. What's his company name?
That's okay. John Hudson Design.
John Hudson. I think it's Nitta, Nitta.
Okay.
I love him. He's incredibly talented. His team is incredibly talented. So when it comes to package design, all of our website stuff, all came from the same space, and we all were super collaborative. But for sure, they had it. It was really, really great. A great experience. But Ruckus is a motion-controlled music maker, and you can either I don't know if you have the commercial. Yeah. We can just show that if you want
All right. So I'll go full screen here with this video.
Sweet.
And we'll play that.
Hold up, wait a minute. Let's go start a ruckus with it. It's Ruckus FX, your motion controlled music maker. Just choose your music, then punch, twist, swipe, or flick to create your own music mix. Ruckus FX comes with 120 mixable music tracks for millions of combinations to be your own content creation sensation. And music's just the start. Your Ruckus has 80 sound effects. Fighting sounds? Check. Animal sounds? Yup. Plus, you can record your own voice.
Rocket.
That's so cool.
Your favorite tracks. You can go online and get your Ruckus FX with the TV exclusive purple tie-dye skin for $49.99 plus $6.99 shipping and handling, and find out how to get a discount and free shipping on a second one. You can log on at ruckusfx.com. Must be 18 or older to order. Ruckus FX. Go.
All right.
Oh,
Nice.
That's cool.
That is so cool. And how the heck did you come up with that, dude?
That's a really good question, right? I don't even know.
How old are you now, if you don't mind my asking?
I am 43 years young.
Okay, and you have kids?
I have one, and she is a little over one. So it wasn't from her, but
Right.
It was from kids. I was in Florida, and my niece and my nephew, who were 10 and 8 at the time, were running around and just hitting things. And at first I thought it was annoying, and then I was like, oh no, this is a play pattern. This is them trying to have percussion and sounds. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if you could create this whole soundscape with your hands? And it could be a soundtrack to your creativity, and it could be fight sequences, and it could be farts, and that was the seed of it. It took a very, very long time to get it where it was, with multiple different design and functionality directions. And I partnered with this amazing company called Kidfinity. And Kidfinity is a newer, smaller toy company, but is partnered with a massive toy company called Just Play. So we're really, really fortunate in that it's small enough to be extremely agile, and we can do pretty much what we want. but we've got the support of a huge toy company that opens a lot of doors and creates a lot of opportunity. And they all, you know, in their own right are incredible. But I had brought to them this code and this movement pattern with just sound effects, which, you know,
when you say you brought to them this code, you mean it was like written down on a piece of paper? Had you actually built some sort of an MVP?
Yes. We went through multiple iterations, some with my internal team, some co-partnering with a different team. And ultimately, like, I knew we had something, but it just wasn't there yet. It wasn't fully formed yet. And would kids really care so much if it was like exclusively a sound machine, like a sound effects device? And there was a big fat question mark. Where does it live? This is another thing that I was just like, where does it live on shelf? All right. That's another thing that people are always looking at. What's the price? What's the play pattern? Where does it live? And can I sell it? So it wasn't exactly a toy, but it really wasn't sort of a musical instrument, and it wasn't electronics. It kind of fit in this weird white space of, you know, can I sell this in? So that was another reason why, you know, it was kind of like, I really don't know what to do with this.
And part of the reason they need to know the answer to that is because of the different buyer. In order to answer the other questions, first of all, you have to know who the customer is and who the buyer is and be able to get that feedback and validation. Yes. Yeah. Or is there any other reason that I'm missing here? It's just so.
That is 100% right. It's like, we are a toy company. We are very good at selling toys on these shelves with these buyers. These are the relationships that we have. Mm-hmm. I don't know,
where this
electronics. Yeah. And are they going to be into it? And does this fit within the library of products that they have? Right. So it was a very weird thing. And we just put our heart into, like, I think there's something here. I really believe that. And, you know, it's sort of a testament to persistence, but also taking the signs and going, like, it needs to evolve in some way. And I think through collaboration, you know, there was this fateful conversation that the CEO of the company and I had, and he's like, you know, can we do music on this? Like, there are these sound files. Instead of sound effects, can it be like chunks of music? And months prior to that, I had put an AC/DC song on it because it had a record feature. So I put a part of an AC/DC song on it where it's just AC/DC Aerosmith with Run DMC. A lot of letters, a lot of letters to remember. You know that one from the 80s, like
oh yeah, that's perfect too.
And then there's rap, and then there's back to rock. And I did it, and I played it for him, and he was like, "Oh boy, I think we have something here." And then I took like
you hit the wow. You went from being a cool thing to a wow thing.
Yeah, that alone, that moment of going from this is a way to bypass having to learn how to play an instrument and get to DJ without having any of those skills so that you can actually create something from nothing. Like, we're basically giving you the constituent parts to make something extraordinary every single time. Mm-hmm. That was the North Star at that point. We just started creating music around it. And, you know, we are so fortunate to have incredible partners at retail that it's dropping into right before holiday. We are on end cap at Walmart for 2 months. Our buyer is the man. Anything you hear about Walmart buyers, not true.
That's awesome.
I will say this. I think it's because Walmart buyers are so committed to their customers that the vendors stand in the way of that relationship. So they're going to treat you really, really rough because they care so much about their customers. It just so happened that our buyer was so incredibly supportive, and now we have end caps, and we're hugely represented there, and Target, and a number of other retailers. So
it reminds me of, I think it was like in the 70s when the piano came out that you could jump on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's that play and that fun way to create some sort of music in this case. How amazing. I mean, I am so excited, and I hope everybody caught it. You were paying attention. That idea became aware to you in that moment because you were enjoying the playfulness of the kids running around and doing this. And instead of judging or being shameful to them or frustrated by their noise making or anything. You just enjoyed them, and vicariously were able to then experience that joy and manifest then this incredible new product as a result.
It's the creative process is such a weird thing, right? And everyone's going to go about it differently. I have found that for me, there are usually two ways which this sort of happens. And every time something happens like this, I'm like, I'm never gonna do it again.
I do the same thing every time. I'll never have another good idea.
That's the last one. And my wife is like, I think you're gonna be okay. Don't worry. I'm like, you don't know. This is it. But for me, it's like, go out into the world and just absorb, right? No judgment, like you said, like beginner's mind. And then just start asking a ton of questions. Like, why is it like that? What wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be cool game? Wouldn't it be cool if you could put this with this? That's cool. And the other thing is I'm actively looking. Like I get onto the internet and I am just looking at products for inspiration of like, that's all right, but if you did that, that would be way better. And then for me, that's what kind of fulfills mostly. And then there's just sort of like, I don't know. I feel like there is a divine element to
that's what I'm saying. It was there,
right,
for the taking for anybody who was paying attention. That idea was already there, but you took it, you seized it, and you ran with it. And it's those people that take action on it that then, in the same way, call it divine or energy or whatever it is, creative or collective consciousness, I don't care. It's that same knowing, that awareness that can walk you through this process and gives you the balls to walk away like you did from your agreement in the beginning with Jax, and then ultimately get what you wanted from that agreement because of that, right?
Totally. And that's such a good point. Like how many times have you shown a product and you're like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? Or, oh, I did think of there were a lot of times during MorfBoard that people were like, oh, I thought about that. I'm like, well, you didn't do anything about it.
Right.
Like that is the difference between somebody who actually makes a product and supports that product and someone who says, like, I have a notebook. Good for you. Like, truly, I'm grateful that you have a creative mind. Honestly, that's the easiest part about launching anything, is the idea. Hopefully it's enough of a spark and enough of a moment to get passionate, to drive you further, right? To drive you forward. But it's those awful, ugly, muddy steps that you take every single day that you want to back off and quit because you're going to hear no 1,000 times. You're like, no, I believe in this. Even when you don't feel like you believe in it.
Yes.
That's what gets a product to market.
Yes. I have an old phrase, no doesn't mean no, just not that way. And as long as I am open to a not that way possibility, it makes me more agreeable with the people that I'm talking to. So for example, when someone says no, I can say, well, help me understand that. Okay, the answer is no. That's fine. I accept it. But help me understand it. Teach me something. Is it no because I need to iterate on this idea in some way to, like you took it from okay to wow when you were talking about adding the music to it? Is it no because it's not a good fit for this company or it's just bad timing, so I need to come back later? Is there a pivot or is it a pass or do I need a hard stop? What can I get out of this so I can keep getting better? And I think that's each step that leads you ultimately to that success. And I think you've modeled that for us so well today. I saw my mom is joining us. Hey, Mom, Susan is on. She's asking a question. I want to ask it real quick for you. How did you come up with the name? I think it would be hard to remember. I'm sure she's not your audience, but that's okay. It's like VR, but without the visual, which is true, that experience.
Yeah. So I think kids they just cause a ruckus, right? Like there's something mischievous and fun about starting a ruckus. Yeah. Like every time I've ever used that word when I was thinking about what it needs to be, not only is it kind of rough like kids, but it's fun, right?
Yeah.
What's that ruckus over there, right?
Yeah.
Like every time I've ever used it in a sentence, it's like kind of, there's a little squint in the eye. And you're like, what's that? What's going on over there?
I love it. It's a great name. And the audience is agreeing with us. We're about to wrap up here. I just want to, for our listening audience, read your URL, Ruckus FX. That's RUKUS as in Sam, F as in Frank, X as in X-ray.com, ruckusfx.com. If you would like to learn more about their product and help us get the word out, right?
Yes, absolutely. That would be huge, and I'd be very, very grateful. Buy it. I was saying earlier, buy it. Don't buy it. Not a big deal. Just tell people about it, because when
You just launched, right? When did you launch?
we just launched, I want to say about a month and a half ago on online,
Yep.
with our good friend John, and really it's all about awareness into holiday. Just getting people really excited about it, so that when people go to the stores and are thinking about their Christmas gifts or their Hanukkah gifts, then they can pick it up.
Yep. So you guys are hearing about this. It's brand spanking new. It's good timing in time for Christmas, right?
Yeah,
Quick
absolutely.
turnaround. Awesome. I am so grateful to you for your time, especially like I said, coming. And you mentioned John. For the record, anybody who's wondering, John Miller from Hutton Miller was on our program 6-8 months ago. You can check that out on YouTube by going to youtube.com/InvenTank if you'd like to watch that interview. But John is co-owner of Hutton Miller, which is a direct response agency, and I assume then responsible for the creative on your website. Yes, the video. Are you doing some commercials also?
Yep. Yeah, they're fantastic.
Awesome. They are fabulous. Absolutely fabulous to work with. All right. Thank you so much, Eitan, for being here and for sharing all this information. I hope that our audience enjoyed it as much as I did, because I'm pumped up. I can't wait to get back to my inventing right now. So it never goes away, right?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And if you all want to share this program and help get the word out about that product, or just encourage other inventors with this story, please consider sharing our program with your network. And as always, thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And I don't think I'll be back next week, because I'm going to a trade show. So I think we'll be off next week and back the following week. You all take care. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and happy inventing.